Hi everyone, Sarush here from SK Talks Games, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through the process of setting up KNULLI Gladiator II on the TrimUI Smart Pro. Now, in case you're not familiar with KNULLI, it's a custom firmware that can be installed on a number of different handheld gaming systems, so if you don't have a TrimUI Smart Pro but another device that is supported, then this guide is going to be beneficial to you as well. Now, for this to work, you're going to need a micro SD card. I suggest you get one that comes with at least 32GB of storage. And obviously this is highly dependable on how many games and what kind of system you're wanting to store on it. You're also going to need an application to flash the image onto your SD card. I'm on Windows, so I'm going to be using Rufus, but others can work too, like the Raspberry Pi Imager for example. I'm not going to go too deep into the flashing process as it's explained extensively on the KNULLI wiki page. So I'm going to leave a link to it down in the description, and I'll also pin it to the top of the comment section. But essentially, you need to download the KNULLI image for the TrimUI Smart Pro from their website, then use an application such as Rufus or maybe something else to flash it onto your SD card. Insert the SD card into the TrimUI Smart Pro and power on your device. Make sure you have enough juice in it. If not, plug it into power so it doesn't die halfway through the installation process. Once the device is on, you'll see the KNULLI Gladiator II logo on the screen and the installation process will begin. This shouldn't generally take too long, but be patient and let it do its thing. Once everything is done, you'll be greeted with the KNULLI interface and some music. Now that we're in KNULLI, you can customize it to your liking. In this video, I'm going to show you how I set up my device, and you can use it how you like, and I highly recommend you toy around with it all and see what works best for you. Anyways, I really don't like the background music, so the first thing I always do after a fresh install is to turn it off. So press the start button, go down to sound settings, and under music, turn off front-end music. When you press B to go back, the music will turn off. The next thing I do is connect to my Wi-Fi and change a couple of things there. Go into network settings. Under settings, tap A on host name and change it to something you'll recognize as your TrimUI Smart Pro later. I usually just use the name of the device, so I'll put in Smart Pro. Next, go down to enable Wi-Fi and toggle it on. Once it's on, go into Wi-Fi SSID and click on the name of your Wi-Fi. Then go to Wi-Fi key and put in your Wi-Fi password. Press B to go back to network settings, and then press B one more time for the system to save your settings and connect you to your Wi-Fi. You'll get a message saying Wi-Fi enabled. When you see the Wi-Fi icon appear in the top right corner of the screen, it means you're connected. Let's go back into network settings one more time to take note of the IP address for the device. We're going to need it later. Once you know the IP address, press B to go back. At this point, I like to set up a few other features and services first before starting to transfer my games over to the SD card. First, I'll go to Game Settings, and under Accounts, I go into RetroAchievement Settings. Enable RetroAchievements, then go into Username to put in your username for RetroAchievements. Next, go into Password to put in your password. Next, I'll go all the way down to the bottom of the RetroAchievements settings menu, and I turn on Index New Games at Startup. This will make sure that the system will index and mark any new games that I add to my system that are compatible with RetroAchievements after a reboot. Press B to go back to Game Settings. Under BIOS Settings, turn off Check BIOS files before running a game. I just find this option to be annoying since a lot of systems actually don't require a BIOS file, but KNULLI will warn you about not having them. Under Save States, I turn on Auto Save Load. By using this, every time I exit a game, KNULLI will create a save state of where I ended the session, and the next time I launch the game, it will take me straight to that exact point. I really like this feature. And when it comes to save states, I leave everything else untouched. Next, I'm going to talk about default global settings. In this section, you can set some settings that will be put into effect for all your systems. I usually don't touch anything here because I tend to set these up system by system. But one thing I do like to do that's specific to the TrimUI Smart Pro is go into Decorations, then in Decoration Set, I pick None. This is because I don't like having decorative bezels on the TrimUI Smart Pro, seeing as the screen is fine the way it is, and the bezels kind of become a distraction for me as I play games, so I like to keep this option off for all systems. If you like decorative bezels, you can keep them on here, and later when we talk about per system settings, you can turn them off per system. Anyways, press B to go back. The next section is controls for changing RetroArch hotkeys. I don't touch this part because I like how things are set up already, but you can go through it and change things up to your liking. Next, we'll go into per system advanced configuration. This is where you can change settings system by system. It's again one of those sections that is just a matter of taste, but I've personally found some settings to work really well with this particular device, and I'm going to show them to you here. Now, I play a lot of Game Boy Advance games on the TrimUI Smart Pro, so I'm going to show you how to set it up here. So under Per System Advanced Configurations, go into Game Boy Advance. Under Emulators, I use the Libretto VBA-M core. In Game Rendering and Shaders, I go into Shader Set, and I'll pick Scaliness. Now, this is the shader I personally like to use for Game Boy Advance. I highly suggest you play around with all the options available here to see which one you like best. But under Game Rendering and Shaders, I don't change anything else, so let's go back by pressing B. And again, just one more time, I want to reiterate that there is a lot of customizability in these menus, so I highly suggest you take your time with them and try different things to see what works best for you. In any case, we're going to press B a couple of times to go back to the main menu. Next, we go down to Scraper and press A. Under Source from Scrape From, I pick Screen Scraper. Now, this is an amazing service, but you do need to have an account for it to work. So if you want to use it, you need to go on their website and make an account. The link will be down below. You can also pick other scraping services if you like. Next, we'll go into Scraper Settings. There are a lot of options here in terms of what you can scrape, but I tend to leave it as it is. The only thing we do have to do if you want to use Screen Scraper, like I mentioned before, is to put in our username and password. So go all the way to the bottom of the menu and under Account, put in your username and password. We're not going to start scraping just yet, as we haven't transferred our games yet. We'll get to that in a bit, so let's press B until you get back to the main menu, then go into Updates and Downloads. If you successfully connected your device to your Wi-Fi, there are some cool things you can do here. For instance, if you go into Content Downloader, you'll be able to download a lot of different bezels and even some homebrew games. Go through the whole thing and see what you like. When you're finished, go back, then go into Themes. This is where you can download any themes you like. There is a pretty good selection to pick from, so have a look and see which one you like best and download them. When you're done, press B to go back. The next section is the bezel project. This is another selection of different bezels that you can download and install if you like. Next, go down to Software Updates and toggle it on. The KNULLI team have recently enabled OTAs, which means updating your device should be super easy. You can leave the update type on stable, and you shouldn't really need to update anything anyways because you've just downloaded the latest stable version. Next, let's go back to the main menu, then go into Device Settings. This is where you can change things like power settings and RGB colors around the sticks, and also the functionality of the function switch. I don't touch the power settings as I find they're perfectly fine for me, but you're free to play around with them and see what works best for you. In RGB LED settings, you can change the mode, brightness, whether you want the colors to adapt to screen brightness and things like that. I like to have the mode on mine set to static and the brightness on 70. I also leave adaptive brightness on because it will automatically switch off the RGB lights when I turn down the screen brightness past a certain point. It's just perfect for playing games in bed in the dark next to a significant other. And lastly, you can play around with the colors to see what you like. Once it's all done, press B to go back. Go into toggle switch mode. You're going to have three options here: mute or unmute, RGB on or off, and airplane mode on or off. And like I mentioned, this is essentially to set settings for the function button. So when it's set to mute, unmute, when you toggle the function button, it will mute the system, and when you put it back on, it will unmute it. This is the same idea for the other options, so really you pick which one you like. I set mine to mute unmute. Now let's press B to go back to the main menu again, then go into System Settings. Under System, you can change the language to what you like. I set mine to English UK. You can also change your time zone and whether you want the time to be in 24 or 12-hour format. I toggle it on for 12-hour format. I'm going to leave everything else untouched and go all the way down to the bottom of the list. Under Advanced, go into Services. In this section, there are a couple of cool little services that I like to use. First, I switch on SAMBA. By using SAMBA, you're able to transfer files like your ROMs, for example, to your device over your local network. So you don't have to physically remove your SD card and put it in your PC to transfer your files into it. This is a really neat feature which works really well. The only thing is, it's going to be a bit slower than transferring directly on your PC, as the network chip on the TrimUI Smart Pro is not exactly the strongest. So depending on how much data you're going to transfer, you can decide whether you want to do it over your network or if you should just use your PC. In any case, I turn on SAMBA. Next, I'll also turn on Syncthing. Syncthing is a service that helps you sync your files across different devices. So for instance, I can sync my files between my PC, my TrimUI Smart Pro, my Steam Deck, and really any other device that can run KNULLI or Batocera. By doing this, I can play my games on any device, exit out of the game, then pick up the same game on another device and start playing from exactly where I left off. It's a neat little app which works really well if it's set up correctly. I've made a whole video which extensively explains how to use Syncthing, so if you're interested, make sure to check out the link below. Anyways, at this point, I'm done setting up the device and I'm ready to start putting my games on it. So we're going to press B a few times to go back to the main menu, go into quit, and then restart system so all the changes we've made go into effect. Now, if you actually insert your SD card into your PC after the setup process, you're going to have two partitions on your SD card. One is the Batocera partition, which will have all the Batocera related files. And the other one will be called Share, and it'll be populated with several folders which we're going to use for ROMs and BIOS files and everything else. In this guide, I'm going to show you how to use SAMBA to transfer your files to your device. The process is exactly the same whether you use SAMBA or use direct transfer on your PC. The difference is by using SAMBA, you're only going to be able to access the share partition. So if you need to play around with the Batocera files, you're going to have to physically insert the SD card into your PC. I'm not going to do that here, so I'm just going to use SAMBA. Anyways, once your device is back on and connected to your network, go on your PC and open the File Explorer. On the left-hand side, click on Network, and the name we gave our device should show up under Computers. If it doesn't do that automatically, go into the address bar of Explorer and type in // followed by the IP address of your device. This will connect your PC to your TrimUI Smart Pro, and you can start browsing the contents of your SD card. You will see a folder named Share, double-click to go into it, then you'll see a bunch of other folders, which we're going to talk about here. The BIOS folder is where you put your BIOS files. Now, KNULLI itself will tell you where you need to place these files exactly, as some of them might require a particular folder structure. To find out where you need to place your BIOS files, go on your device and press the Start button to bring up the main menu, then go into Game Settings, and under BIOS Files, go into Missing BIOS Check. KNULLI will run a check to see which BIOS files you have in the BIOS folder of your SD card. I obviously haven't put in any BIOS files in this installation of KNULLI yet, so everything is going to be shown as missing. And if you tap right on the D-pad and go into All, you'll get a list of all the systems that are missing their BIOS files on the TrimUI Smart Pro, what BIOS files they need, what they should be named, and where they should be placed. For example, if we look under Saturn, we can see a list of all the Sega Saturn BIOS files that KNULLI requires to run Saturn games, what their names are, and where they should be placed, which in this case is directly inside the BIOS files on your SD card. If we go a little bit further down under ScumVM, we can see KNULLI actually needs another folder inside the BIOS folder named ScumVM. You'll need to then make another folder inside that ScumVM folder and name it Extra, and then you can put the BIOS files in there. This is a neat little feature of KNULLI, which will help you put everything exactly where it needs to go so that KNULLI can run things smoothly. But going back to the PC and the contents of the SD card, there are a couple of other folders that I want to talk about. The first one is the Saves folder, which will have all your saves in it. KNULLI organizes your saves based on the system. So for instance, it doesn't matter which emulator you use to play Game Boy Advance games, all saves will go in the GBA folder. This is useful for transferring your saves from another device. You just need to make sure to place them in the right folder. You also got to make sure that your saves are compatible with the emulator you're using. I've talked extensively about this in that Syncthing video that I mentioned before, so again, if you're interested, make sure to check it out. And lastly, the ROMs folder. This is where you're going to place all your legally obtained ROMs. You just need to make sure they're placed in the correct folder. It can be a bit confusing at first when looking at this huge list of folders, but this is just a list of gaming systems. They're abbreviated and in alphabetical order, which makes it pretty easy to navigate. So from here, go through your ROMs and place them where they need to go. So for instance, your Game Boy Advance ROMs will go into GBA, your Game Boy Color ROMs will go into GBC, PS1 games go into PSX. Apparently it used to be called PSX. I don't know. Anyways, place everything where they need to go. After it's all finished, we need to do one more thing on the device before everything is ready to go. If you transferred your files using SAMBA, tap the Start button to go into the main menu, then go into Game Settings, and then Update Game Lists. It's going to ask you if you really want to update games lists, tap A for yes. If you physically removed your SD card to move your files on your PC, This will be done automatically when you boot up the device. KNULLI is going to scan your SD card and then display your games under their corresponding systems, but you'll notice there won't be any box art, which probably looks a bit boring. So press the start button to go into the main menu, then go into scraper. Under filters, change things around to what you like. For instance, you might want to scrape artwork for only one system or two. So go into systems included and select those systems. If you want to scrape all the games you have on your SD card, make sure to select every system. Just remember, for larger libraries, this might take a few hours. Once it's all set, press scrape now and let KNULLI handle the work. And that's it. This is how I set up KNULLI on my devices. As I mentioned before, there are so many other options you can play around with to make KNULLI work exactly how you like it. If you go into user interface settings, you can change the way your theme looks, which type of box art to be displayed with how much information about the game. You can play around with the CPU clock rate to see if you can overclock the CPU, in case that's your thing, to see how far you can push the system. And there's so much more. You can even set things up like Portmaster and Pico 8, which I didn't cover in this video because honestly, they need their own video. If you're interested, let me know in the comments below and I'll make sure to make videos explaining how to set those up as well. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. If that's the case, make sure to give it a like and maybe even consider subscribing to the channel. Enjoy using KNULLI on your TrimUI Smart Pro, and I'll see you in the next one.